Okay, good evening, everyone. We had a problem with Facebook Live. There must be something with the Facebook channel. So those of you that are just listening, you're listening probably the next day. So we're going to move further with our segment today with our wonderful, wonderful guests that are with us. And we're so happy that those of you that are on Zoom, that you were able to get on, and we appreciate you being here with us. We are still staying in our Overcoming Devastation, where we are taking a look at Black Lives Matters. And where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? So our wonderful guests tonight are two more of my favorite people. The first is Rusty Brother Russell Harris. He's also known as Pastor Russell Harris, and he is the founder and senior pastor of the Full Joy Center. And certainly, I owe this man a debt of gratitude. For those of you that know me from way back when, he's the reason that I am as sweet and nice as I am right now. He's the guy that made sure that I knew who Jesus was. He told me I need to come to Jesus moment. And he took me to a church one night and he spoke about public enemy number one. And I came to Jesus, y'all. So, Pastor Rusty Harris, thank you so much for being with us. Also with us, as Dr. Lester Young has always forestated, one of the greatest principals in the country is none other than our own Principal Allison Farrington from the High School of Research and Services in Bed-Stuy. Do or die. The amazing work that she has done. I met her several years ago with the Adelaide Sanford Institute when we were doing our parent conferences, and she has been our faithful supporter every year, and she has saved the lives of so many people. I remember taking a young lady to her who was 2 years behind in education, and she was sitting in the 10th grade, belonged in the 12th grade, and they were bullying her, and I took her to Allison, and that young lady graduated only one semester behind. What an amazing feat. So we have the goods. So let us do our usual custom and let's just offer up a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for another opportunity just to tune in and be with your people. We thank you, God, for you just taking us through this pandemic. We pray for every family that is grieving. We understand that our people are still dying. So we're praying for all of you that are in grief right now, and we know that earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot cure. Look on our presenters tonight, oh God, as we speak into the lives of our people, for Black Lives Matter, and they matter to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for being with us. Uh, we're going to get right on to our questions because we got a lot to do and a little bit of time to do it in. So I'm going to ask our Pastor Rusty if you just kick us off, just give us the sentiments of how you feel about this pandemic and Black Lives Matters, whatever you'd like to say to open up our conversation.
First, let me say thank you to you, Dr. Moses, for inviting me to be a part of this. And then also our big greetings to everyone that's on this line. It is absolutely a privilege to be with you all. I think the first question that she did ask was my overall feelings about the coronavirus. I wasn't affected as much as those that are working because I'm retired. I think the one thing that really affected me was when they said that Black and brown people are more disproportionately affected and are dying from the coronavirus, and it really that kind of blew my mind, and I really wanted to understand and know why. And I've been listening to a few webinars, one from the Congressional Black Caucus, which is a good webinar that you might want to check out. And they did kind of bring out, and I heard it other places, that Black and brown people the ones that are working those essential jobs where they have to work. My wife and my daughter have been blessed that they weren't considered essential, so they could work from home. But the majority of the Black community, and the brown community are not, not considered non-essential. So they have to be out in the midst and have to be interacting with people. And this is one of the reasons why they were disproportionately affected. They were disproportionately affected. I even heard this story told several times, that someone that went to the doctor with symptoms, and the doctor said that they're okay. They sent them home. When they got home, they didn't get better, and it turns out that they were actually infected with the virus, and it was happening more times than none with blacks than it was with whites. Then there's the whole issue with our lack of access to health care, which is affecting the Black community more so. So that was that piece that really affected me, that concerned me. And then when it came to, while we were in shutdown, and I'm watching the news of this police officer with his knees on the neck of George Floyd, Dr. Moses, I really believe I went through every stage of grief, from denial all the way straight through. I really, a few times, I had just had to literally step away from the television because it so disturbed me, because we're sitting literally watching someone die, and it upset me. I'm watching this police officer shift and reposition himself until this person dies. And of course, there was the denial, there was anger, probably some bargaining, some depression. And then we got to the point of acceptance. And this is the point, not that I'm accepting his death, but accepting that there is something that we must do to right these wrongs. So that's where I've been. That's what I've been dealing with, and what I have been going through since January up until this present time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Also, for our listening audience, Pastor Rusty is a retired paramedic, and his wife and child, one of his children, works in the health professional field as well. Thank you so much, Pastor Rusty. Principal Farrington, what say you about this season that we're in?
So again, I just want to echo the sentiments of the past and say thank you for allowing us to have this forum and this platform, and thank you for all of you guys chiming in. When it comes to the actual pandemic, I don't think that people fully understand how this is impacting us in so many ways. Not only with us being essential workers, right? When we're teaching and educating the Black and brown community in a remote learning field, those teachers are essential workers as well. Even though we may not have to leave our doors, we are working tirelessly and endlessly in order to educate a population of children whom in their regular school homes may not have had access to the technology.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're flipping the grid and saying this is going to be remote, and our people are relational. Our people need to sit next to each other and commune with each other and laugh and joke and vibe with each other. And then we went remote, right? And when we went remote, we went isolation. And the problem with isolation is our kids don't learn that way. These times have not been great for our young people. They are dealing with the trauma of losing loved ones. They're dealing with the trauma of losing their teachers, their school safety agents to COVID, literally. They're dealing with losing the relationships that they've established and bonded inside of the building with people. They are dealing with, I don't have a place to eat anymore.
Yes.
I don't have a haven anymore. I don't have a safe place to be. And then we're asking them to learn, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, in a space in which you have 7 other people trying to use one device. And if we as educators aren't empathetic to the fact that, right, their broadband, their Wi-Fi ability may be limited because so many different devices are pulling on their internet access, these times are very, very difficult. So now when we go to the Black Lives Matter movement, here's my issue.
Mm-hmm.
This moment has been a movement for hundreds of years.
Uh-huh.
This moment has been a movement for hundreds of years. So now people want to jump on the bandwagon as if all of these injustices have not existed since the inception of this country and then beforehand, right? So let's speak historically, beforehand, because you have slavery happening in the Caribbean hundreds of years before it happened here in North America, right? So this moment, the issue that I have is we have the pressure, but not the policy change. With the protesting, we have the pressure in the streets. Yeah, you could paint a street. I'm glad about that. I'm glad that you did that. I'm happy that you did that. I'm happy that you put art on this thing. But now where is the policy change that comes with that, right? So what we need to do is make sure that we're educating our young people and we're educating ourselves to understand that policy change needs to become part of the movement, not just the moment.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that insight. Um, so do you think, Allison, with these times that we're living in, and although we have been trying to push our agenda and our narrative for freedom for all of these years, and it seems like in this 21st century, year of 2020, that we may have stepped up the nodule a little bit. And is it because, or do you feel, Pastor Rusty and Allison, that the times are changing? That this time is changing because the generations has changed. I've seen white folks on all types of social media challenging their parents and saying that this is wrong. And the parent is saying that the child doesn't know both sides of the story. What say that to you, Allison, and then Pastor Rusty?
So if we look at one of the newspaper articles that was just in the Post today, and you have an assistant principal
Mm-hmm.
who was posting about the privileges that and you know, it was colored, it was blurred, it was gray, but we understood what was being said,
Mm-hmm.
right? Times have not changed, right? And then also, I'm gonna be honest and be real, this movement cannot be hijacked.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be led by the people who are experiencing the oppression.
Right.
Our voices have to be heard. So yes, there are more people who are part of the movement, right? Mm-hmm. And we need to band together because the strength is definitely in banding together. Mm-hmm. And right now, unfortunately, in many cases, in many areas, we are not in a position of power. I am as a school leader. I can determine what curriculum I use. I can determine how I use my school's budget. Although this is the first time in history, principals in New York City don't know what their school budget is. And we're supposed to start planning for next school year. I have no idea of the dollar amount I will have to spend in order to educate my children.
Wow.
No idea. Normally we get our budgets in April and May. So I'm supposed to plan accordingly for forever that I don't know what exists, that exists. So no, these times have not changed. Yes, younger people are getting involved with the movement, but if you think about every movement, even the civil rights movement, you had the college students in SNCC, you had the college students, you had the children marching, you had the children's marches. I think that what is happening now is the use of this device,
okay,
where people can record and show.
Okay.
Which makes it instantaneous. We are now our own media source. We are now our own individual media source, mm-hmm. which is why the movement has changed. But the thing about it also that we have to understand is with this movement, one of the biggest differences is who's the single leader?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Who's the leader?
Wow.
And until we solidify ourselves and come up with an agenda that we can, instead of bandwagoning on an agenda, right? Until we solidify ourselves and design leadership in order to move the movement, we're going to have an issue.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
Yes.
Heard it quite like that. Pastor Rusty.
I think Allison said exactly everything that I was going to say just about. Little has changed as far as our struggle for equality in this country. And we still get the same kind of pushback, and even sometimes even more that we've gotten in the 1950s and 1960s. The one thing that has changed, I believe, is the young people that are involved. You know, there seems to be a lot more young people. They don't seem to be afraid of giving voice to what's going on. You know, they're out there, and then they're relentless, which, you know, I'm glad to see, you know, how relentless they are. And then and I think for them, there's probably more of a sense of desperation, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that's going to lose their lives at the hand of, you know, for the most part, they're going to lose their lives at the hands of white racism. However, what is different, as Farrington said, is the social media piece of it. Everybody knows about it now. Where there was a time that this country could do their dirt and nobody knew about it, now it's all across the globe. You know, it's global. And the other piece that I absolutely agree with, and there's one thing that I learned in undergrad, that as far as the Black community, we have never been a monolith. Never. You know, there's always been different views and different people and different movements, but not once have we come together, you know, and you know, I'm familiar with so many different pieces that are so key to what, you know, we need to know and understand, but they don't seem to be trying to work as one unit, you know. And there was a piece that and I'll probably save that part for later. It's a piece that I read in the Equal Justice Initiative on segregation in America, and I'll share that later on. That goes along with what this is all about. But all of that you said, I absolutely agree with.
Right. Wow. I mean, this is definitely shedding some new light in the way that we think as a people, that there definitely has to be leadership in order for this to move this agenda forward. And I think that is a key part that we need to put in front of our community, our legislators, and anybody that will listen, because certainly at the time, Martin Luther King was that leader. He was that leader. But the civil rights did not come into fruition, as you know, until he was murdered. Once he was murdered, and then we start tearing up stuff, then, you know, they said, okay, you know, let's do away with this Jim Crow. Now, for those of you that are listening, who may not be aware of what was printed in that daily news post, it was things like, the person said, let me tell you what privilege is. Privilege is wearing $200 sneakers when you never had a job. Privilege is wearing a $300 Beat headphones while living in public housing. Privilege is having smartphones with a data plan which you receive no bill for. Privilege is living in public subsidized housing where you don't have to pay a water bill, where raising property taxes, you don't have to pay taxes, you don't barely have to pay rent, and just on and on and on. But you all can definitely take a good look at this, because it talks about Black people just having as many children as they want and then sending them to daycare for free. So as our guest has already said, they cannot steal or hijack what we're trying to do on a negative or a positive level.
Okay.
So negatively, they're trying to change the narrative as though this is the issue. This is the issue. And one of the things that we know for sure is that we will hear white folks say, you know, I didn't own slave plantations. I was never a master over slaves. I never did all those horrible things. But for sure, they are benefiting from it. So this, what I would say to this person, number one, why is this a privilege? This is our country. We built it as a people. Maybe it's owed to us. And there's no way that you can buy Beats and sneakers if you've never worked, if you don't have any money. Nobody's giving it to us for free. So there are those people out there that are being very negative, but that is their truth that they try to share with their kids. But many of their children are not accepting it as such, as you know. And on top of that, they understand that people should be able to live their lives. And now we get to tell our story, and we need to figure out, as you guys are saying here on this segment tonight, how do we tell our story which really going to make change for us forever? Because I think that it's high time for us to have change, basically, that's going to help us forever and ever. So I really appreciate your thoughts on that, and that was great. So I always say that the streets are talking. So that's what we hear that some of the white people are saying about us. And I don't even think that all of them are white supremacists, because there are Black people, Rusty and Allison, who think this way about us too.
Yes. Yeah.
Who think that we're just lazy, don't want to get up and don't want to do nothing. Now, as a clinician, I would not be honest if I didn't say that yes, some of our families have issues, but white folks' family have issues too. Maybe they just don't get out of there. And sometimes the statistics are not right, because white folks are on welfare, just like Black folks are on welfare. And there are more white people on welfare than there are with Blacks on welfare. So when you're thinking about your congregations, Pastor Rusty, and your students, what are you hearing out there from our people on the streets? What's some of your language that the audience is saying when you hear from them?
So I have a piece, I think I forwarded to you from my nephew. My sister's son, he's in his 20s, mm-hmm. and he has a website, and he does writing. He writes, actually, he's a good writer. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a very good piece. It's called "We Are the Unheard." Mm-hmm. It's pretty long, but it was a very visceral but scholarly response to the recent murders by police officers, and the response by good folks, by good folks, what he said, both Black and white, that protested. The one thing that he did say that I thought was really profound is Black people, because because they always go back to, okay, so we're talking about Black Lives Matter, so why do Black people kill Black people? That's what they always say. Right. And he says, and which I thought was very profound, that Black people aren't killing Black people just because they're Black. And then he goes in to talk about, really the whole, since 1619, all of the racism, all of the slavery, the mindset, that we have developed for the past 401 years, mm-hmm. The redlining, all of that brought us to where we are today, that even created the self-hate that we have one for another. Yeah. When you speak to our counterparts about what's going on in the inner cities, mm-hmm. they are what I say, they are purposely oblivious to what's going on, and they call us animals. Mm-hmm. Of course, they didn't call those people that rioted in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 1920s. Mm-hmm. They didn't call them animals. They were animals. Mm-hmm. But when we get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we decide that we're going to protest, and then, mind you, the other piece of that is not all of the Black folks were the ones that was involved in all of the rioting and looting and damaging. There were plants that were put in there, to discredit, and also, again, to try to hijack, the issue, but with my nephew, the one thing that he says that he is now concerned about how he looks. He's a skinny, tall Black man, and he's afraid of how he looks out in public. He even has to be careful of the type of vehicle that he drives and how he, you know, makes his vehicle look, because he's afraid of being pulled over by a police officer and potentially killed. You know, and this is the sentiment by most particularly the young people, you know, in our communities. And I'm kind of surprised because I feel the same way myself. Coming from Baltimore, where, you know, we've always been touted as a very violent city, you know, I'm more afraid of being pulled over by the police than worried about being robbed and killed by, you know, some knucklehead on the street in this city. Because, and I think, I kind of get the feeling that that is probably the same all across this country, you know. And I do know that just what he was saying, you know, he's not even really mentioning the fact that he, you know, he could be robbed and he could be murdered, you know, by one of his peers. We are more afraid or more concerned about not getting ourselves in a position, you know, where we have to find the police officer with their knees on our neck.
Wow. Thank you. Allison?
So when 45 was first elected, the day after the election, there was an eerie sense in the school building. The students knew something was wrong but couldn't verbalize it. There was a ghost walking around in our school community.
Wow.
When COVID first hit, this is what it's like. When remote learning hit, this is what it's like. When the George Floyd murder happened, you know, and to watch somebody be killed, this is what it's like. So right now for me, the streets aren't talking, but their silence is saying something.
Mm-hmm.
What it says to me is our young people need to be taught how to verbalize what it is they're feeling. Because the feeling of oppression, the feeling of fear is leading to so many systemic issues in our community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be mental health issues, inabilities to remain focused in school, aggression, disengagement from school, or even attachment to school because I need a safe haven.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the students can't verbalize what it is they're feeling right now, but they know that something is wrong, is scary. What these streets are also saying, because I'm hearing silence from kids,
Mm-hmm.
and I know my babies. I know them because I'm used to being with them. My office is in the hallway. I'm used to being around them. But what I'm also hearing from parents is, I need to be more involved in the school community, because I didn't know that my kid was reading on this level or couldn't read or couldn't write. And these kids are in high school. And the overwhelming majority of my students, and understand this, people who are chiming in today, the criteria to get into research and service high school is you must have been unsuccessful in high school before. The overwhelming majority of our students are 18 and older when they get to us. So I hear parents now saying, I didn't realize my kid couldn't read and write, which is why remote learning isn't going well for them. I didn't realize that my kid had these issues and couldn't sit still. I didn't realize I had no say about, or my kid didn't listen to me when I tell the kid, please don't leave the house, COVID is out there. And yes, Black people, we can catch it. Because in the beginning, remember, we were joking about it. This is not a Black person's disease. Yes, it is. It most certainly is. The other thing that the streets are talking about from an educational side is the level of professional development that needs to happen for teachers and administrators, for anybody in the school building. How to become more technologically savvy. When remote learning first happened, we went with whatever the DOE and the mayor and the chancellor said. We had no idea whatsoever what to do except for post assignments. Posting an assignment is not instructing a child. There's a huge difference. So there's definitely a need for professional development in terms of how to use computers, because generally what we tell kids to do is type a paper or maybe make a PowerPoint. But then on the flip, when it comes to STEM education, we need our young people to be savvy in terms of making these apps that are making money during these remote learning times. So if remote learning or if at-home learning is the wave, How do we not capitalize on this thing? Because everybody's using Flipgrid, everybody's using Nearpod, everybody's using all of these different apps that our kids who are technologically savvy can develop. We also need to think about the level of trauma that all of us are facing.
Mhm.
Every person connected to a student is facing their own personal trauma because they have surely been impacted by COVID. They've been impacted by being isolated. They've been impacted by being socially distanced. And now they're going to be impacted by, I've spent months by myself and now I need to go back into a school building. So the trauma that we're all going to be facing, we're going to be facing the trauma of I'm coming out into the public. Kids are coming to me and they're coming to me with being very needy with a huge educational gap because our students are not doing well during these times. Academically, they are not doing well. They have checked out and they have checked out. So this is a huge gap for us and we have to fill in the gap. And I can't even wrap myself around exactly what it is we need to do in September in order to fill this, not just summer gap, but the gap that we've had for the past 90 days.
Wow. Wow. So two things I heard loud and clear. That there is a silence, Farrington, that is just scary out there because we don't know what's happening, what's coming next. And what I can say as a clinician that I have gotten more referrals for teenagers to 21 years old, in the early 20s and teenagers, from having to be home in quarantine and not being able to have answers to so many of the things that they're feeling and what they're going through, and things that may have been laying dormant in their past is now coming up, and they're having all different types of psychosis. So yeah, that silence is affecting them mentally. And that's why it's important for us to figure out a way to communicate, figure out a way to talk with them, figure out a way to get them on these Zooms and social medias so we can have, courageous conversations, not just fun and games with TikTok. I get TikTok for what it is, but some of these young people need real conversations because that silence is a little scary and it's a little dangerous. And what I heard from you, Pastor Rusty, is that the children are looking at the self-hatred. The children are looking at why is it that we are now, well, not now, but why is it that there's so much black on black crime?
Yes.
Why is it okay for a black boy to shoot another black boy? There's very rarely there's the ability or a chance to talk it out or to work it out. And that I think this also gives us an opportunity, back to what you both are saying, is that we need leadership to figure out how to address this self-hatred. Because every time we talk about police brutality, white supremacy, somebody is flooding the airways with "you kill yourself." In other words, if we kill ourselves, why should other people respect us? And yes, it goes back to slavery as to why we are doing this, but at some point we do take responsibility and onus if we're not teaching this, if we're not teaching Black history, if we're not teaching that this is wrong, that we shoot each other, we go for each other, never giving anybody an opportunity to talk. Now, whenever you talk to the people on the streets, they will tell you, Black people are not bringing guns over here. Black people are not bringing drugs over here. We don't own any planes that get the stuff to the United States. So yes, it is a bigger conversation, but the limited conversation is that we have to look out for each other and we have to do better by each other. And how do we teach us as a people to love one another? How do we teach people to love one another when some of them don't experience love in their own homes? And when they don't experience love in their own homes, they don't know how to experience it in the schools, in the church, in the community. Church doesn't make people just automatically come in and start loving themselves. As you know, Pastor Rusty, that when they get to you, they may act like the church drove them crazy, but you know they were crazy before they got to your church. You already know that there was some stuff going on. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? if God said the two of you were in charge and you had to figure it out, and the two people, you two people, I know can figure out stuff. I have watched you all do amazing work with people that the world had given up on, given up on. And there was something inside of you both that allowed you to make change in those individual lives. But then it was bigger than an individual. Allison, you have a whole school. When your graduation rate in your second chance school is greater than the rate that is in some of our mainstream regular high schools. So what about you, Allison, is so different, other than the food pantry? For those of you listening, this is my favorite story about Allison, that she had a food pantry. And I walked in there and it looked like a state-of-the-art grocery store. Wow. Not like a food pantry with day-old food. All of her dates, there was not one expired date. A lot of that food that they give us in the church pantry, that stuff is expired. But they said it have a shelf life, so we still take it. Allison has no expired anything in her store. She has clothes, she has food, and it's student-led, it's student-run. And my favorite sentence that I heard her say is that when you come in here, you're not going to be kicking a cat off the bread. Because for those of you outside of New York, we have bodegas here, corner stores. And in those corner stores, they have cats running around in the camp. I guess to keep the mice down. But the cats live on top of the food. They'll be sitting right on the soft bread, relaxing. When you walk in, they jump off the bread. Allison said they won't be kicking any cats off the bread in here. So talk to us, Allison. What are some of the things that are so unique about your school that we can pull in to create some type of systemic change or community change for our young people and families?
So one, I'm very blessed to be on a campus, right? And for those of you who don't know, you probably can't see my shirt, but I have my a mentor, Dr. Mickens, on my shirt. I have my friend and assistant principal on the call right now, Dr. Christopher Smith. I have my sister, Gretchen Harrison, who's the principal of Boys and Girls High School. I'm blessed to be on a wonderful campus where we can pool resources. The 2 days before we closed schools, I think we pooled our resources as a campus community and spent roughly $40,000 on food to give away to families. Because we understood, like, yes, we're moving into remote learning, but there's a difference between food shopping and stockpile shopping, right? It's different. We didn't know how long we were going to be locked down in. So being able to pull the community together was really, really, really important. And moving forward, that's definitely what we have to do, walk, lock, stock, and barrel as a campus community. The other thing that I think is really important, and I was voluntold by my superintendent to do this, lead a student forum on race and equity, because I think that all too often we say things like systemic racism. Our kids can say it, our students can say it, but they can't provide concrete examples of it. They know they feel it, but they cannot provide concrete notions of it or examples of it. So tomorrow we'll be leading a student forum in which we'll have people from different venues, different walks of life, whether it's the police department, the civilian complaint review board, housing, to talk about systematic racism in these particular areas, from the medical profession, to talk about systematic racism in these particular areas in order to teach young people. Our young people have to be taught in order to protest properly, in order to protest and plan properly. When I started out this session, I talked about pressure and policy. We're in the pressure phase right now, right? Our students are under pressure, and that pressure makes diamonds. But part of that pressure is education. not just regular reading, math, and writing, science, that's all good. But we also have to teach them about what is happening to them, and then how could they use their voices and their actions to impact policy. That is extremely important. Our kids don't understand that if we want to stop police brutality in our community, we got two options. We either going to become the Black Panthers of our community, or we're going to become the cops in our community. We got two options. Or we're going to need grandma to sit back on the stoop to tell, baby, put that down. Baby, don't throw that trash on the floor, because we've gone away from community policing as well. We've gone away from the day in which we were scared because Miss Bertha was looking out the window and she was going to tell on us. So we need to go back into who it is we are, because we've become very isolated as a people, and look at what ways best police us as a people. And it was us governing us. Not to say that others can't be a part of it, but we need to go back to our roots. We need to go back to grassroots. We need to educate young people. We need to educate old people, because there definitely is a generational disconnect as well, right? Our young people may not have respect for the old people. Our old people may be afraid of our young people. So we need to get back to the days in which these young boys are carrying bags for their elderly coming out of the grocery store, so that Miss Betty can have a relationship with Mike that was on the corner in front of the building. We need to go back to what it is that works so well for us, in addition to making sure that we are educating our young people in order to move our communities forward. They have to understand that they are the power base right now.
Wow. Wow. So I think you should be our leader. That's what I tell people. You know, people all say, this is what you need to do. I said, well, if God gave it to you, I think he was telling you to do it.
I tell me to finish up this doctoral degree.
Girl, you already a doctor now, but Pastor Rusty?
Yes, I really wish that I was as smart as most folks. Everything that she said, that Allison said, is absolutely true. I had a list of things. I want to kind of flip it just a little bit, because you started off with I'm a retired firefighter, and the one thing that we did later, sometime later into my career, we began to deal with the firefighters that were dealing with crisis, and they started crisis intervention. So, whenever we get on a bad call, particularly where a child died, we would go and we would sit down and we would talk about it, because what we had a tendency to do was, to not say anything and go to our individual little corners, and it would bother us. And, I didn't really realize that I was dealing myself with burnout until I went to one of my recertification classes.
Wow.
And I'm dating myself when I say this, if anybody remember this, you remember the hostages in Beirut?
No.
Back in the 80s, the hostages.
Oh, yes.
This is when Carter was president, and they kept them there for almost a year. Once they released them, the very first thing that they did was debrief them. They took them to a place and they debriefed them. We're talking about 401 years, of being pushed down, put down, beat down, knocked down, made to look ugly, said that we're stupid, said that we're worthless, saying that we don't matter, even today, saying that we don't matter. To the extent, this is trauma, this is crisis, to the extent that now we believe it. So I actually came across a book, and so in this piece, we need to deal with psychological treatment.
Yep.
There's a book by Joy DeGroy, and it's called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Right.
Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Very well-written book. She's incredible. I love this book, and she goes down the list of the reasons why we can, respond the way that we do. Even to the extent that she even talks about the fact that sometimes our response to crises are in our DNA. You know, as an example, when your grandparents or your great grandparents or your great grandparents, experience a crisis, study has shown that has passed on through DNA. You know, we have yet to be debriefed from this crisis, from this bondage of slavery, and also not just the bondage of slavery, but Jim Crow, racism. You know, this is why, the Confederate flag affects us the way that it does, and it doesn't affect the oppressor, because, we have yet to be debriefed from that. So we need psychological treatment. We also, years ago, not long ago, I went to a prayer breakfast that was sponsored by the Congressional Black Caucus, and Bishop Charles Blake was the speaker. And I think this is when he introduced his initiative. He called it and so I'm borrowing this from him, the Urban Initiative. And these things kind of stood out to me. He says the things that they want to do is to deal with the education. He wanted to get access, deal with excellence and quality. And then I've added that we further, and I think Allison said this, we need to tell our own story. And we need to tell our own story and not his story, because his story has always been distorted, and I've been just upset with myself for the things that I didn't know, that I only learned when I became an adult, that I wish I had known when I, was younger. Wow. But we didn't have Black history until I think I was in high school. I'm still dating myself, so don't y'all be trying to figure out how old I am. But we didn't have Black history, and then the Black history that they taught, it was just limited. And there's so much that we don't know about us as a people. Right. We need a way, as Allison said, that we can tell our story. Not a distorted story, not a whitewash story, but our story. I was one of the pastors of our fellowship was talking about Abraham Lincoln, and they said that he was the great emancipator, but he wasn't. He did not want to emancipate slaves. What he wanted was to keep the Union, to get the South back into the Union, and he was willing to do anything, whether it is to send the slaves back to Africa, keep the slaves or free the slaves. His priority was uniting United States back again, not us. So he wasn't really an emancipator. So the other thing to talk about that Bishop Blake talks about is economic development. And I say this real quickly. I was looking on Google Map over the city of Baltimore one day, and I did the, when you do the satellite look. And all I saw, block upon block upon block was vacant housing, trash, blight, empty lots, and it was, and I don't know why it was an epiphany, but it was, I was able to see the psychological issue. When you have lived generation upon generation upon generation in blight, and vacant houses on either side of you, and broken down vehicles, trash, dirt, rats, right. You become helpless, you become hopeless. And I know, Dr. Moses, that persons that's dealing with depression that become helpless and hopeless, they generally become suicidal, and if you're helpless and hopeless, not only do you tend to be suicidal, but you also tend to be homicidal. The average young person in any given major city does not, I know one time they said they don't expect to live to 21, but I think it's even younger than that. They don't expect to live till 17, So if they don't expect to live till 17, their life is a mess, and they're helpless and hopeless. And that's when, they have a tendency to, number one, if I gotta die, I'm just gonna die. And if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna take some people out with me. That mentality, that mindset. I've been in the streets and I know that mindset and that mentality. However, the bottom line issue with the drugs and the guns and all of that is the poverty that's in these cities. That lack of resources that, that I watched leave out of our cities as I was coming up. So we need economic development, we need crime prevention, and we also need criminal justice reform. There are people that's in the prisons that have no business there, and they're going to do 30 and 40 years for just holding a marijuana roach in their hand, things like that, and which means that's taking parents away from their children and things like that. That's affecting our community. And then he talks about even family life, about developing the family, and also, and last but not least, he talks about financial literacy. We need to learn how to handle our own money. I have a sign because we're going out this weekend. We're going out for what we call our sidewalk solidarity, with our signs. And I have on my sign, Black lives, Black money, Black votes matter.
Mm-hmm.
Black lives, Black dollars, Black votes matter.
Mm-hmm.
And saying what we have yet to do really is to strengthen our economic base.
Mm-hmm.
Because in this country, which is a capitalistic country, the only thing that they listen to is money.
Mm-hmm.
Is money. And somebody gave the comparison. That's why I close. You will never ever see a white police put his knee on a Jewish person's neck.
Wow.
Until that Jewish person died, because Jewish people have money, and then people have to suffer the consequences because of that, and they will hold their money back or whatever, and so we need to be taught and retaught, as Allison said, and hats off to her, and she's just an incredible person. I appreciate all that she's doing, everything that she's doing for our community. She's amazing.
Thank you.
And so are you, Pastor Harris.
Yep.
That was amazing. All that you just said was I got it. I got so many notes from the two of you. We just got to figure out how to get it done. So Rachel and Elena, whoever's in charge of the questions, we have a couple questions tonight. I cannot tell you how my phone is going crazy with the people saying, why are we not on Facebook Live? So I've told them it'll be up tomorrow. So certainly we'll probably have to have you guys back. You're doing an incredible job. I'm loving this information. And as you guys are getting the questions ready, Pastor Harris, you said that they would not have put their knee on a Jewish man's neck.
Not here in Baltimore.
Because of money?
Money and power.
Power.
And they both go hand in hand.
1 million of them.
Yes.
Would have jumped.
Absolutely.
They wouldn't have said. I remember here, the strife was that the Jewish community was still having funerals.
Yes.
Pandemic.
And they were gangster too.
Yeah. And there was 1,000 of them out there.
I saw it.
And they didn't even look in the police's direction. They kept marching and chanting and going where they were going. But you're absolutely right. Money and power. Wow. Thank you so much for that. Allison, did you have something you wanted to end up with before we get into the couple of questions that we have?
So, again, I just want to remind people that we're in the pressure phase, not the policy phase.
Yeah.
And that policy phase is very important. Until where we only can truly affect change is through policy.
Mm-hmm.
Is through policy. And we need to keep the pressure on the same way that pressure was on that man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
We got to keep the pressure on for 8,000 years in order to affect policy.
Wow, thank you so much. Okay, ladies, we ready for the first question?
This question is for Pastor Harris. What are your thoughts on how the church has responded to the Black Lives Matter movement? Have they done enough, or are there things that still can and need to be done?
I think, well, obviously, we can never do too much. I know pastors here in Baltimore And even before George Floyd was murdered, they were out on the streets. I actually done some marching with some of the pastors, some really good pastors that are out there. They're out front, and some that traditionally wouldn't necessarily be out there, you know, because not in the church world, anybody know anything about the church world, we usually expect the Baptist pastors to be more into the social justice, but I'm finding that it's crossing over, you know, to all pastors. A lot of pastors that is really dealing with this issue of social justice. Certainly, we can do more. I think there some of those things that I itemized, probably if we got 2 or 3 or 4 pastors together, you know, and pooled our resources, we could probably attack some of these things or approach some of these things. I don't think that I think that there's much to be done. There's much more to be done. The one thing that has always concerned me, I tell this story. My mother was a good old Pentecostal, you know, shouting down, speaking in tongues person. And the one thing that my mother nor my father, they never spoke to me about social justice issues. And I really didn't start dealing with social justice issues until I actually got into my teens, into my 20s. But they never spoke about it. I don't understand why, you know, and I do know that I think that there was a time that, you know, the church didn't believe that, that some churches didn't believe that the church would get involved in social justice issues. I think you're seeing more and more churches getting involved, a whole lot more churches. And I think we'd be surprised at the ones that we do see getting involved. But we can never do too much. You know, we can never do too much. My ministry, we've always been a ministry that have been seeking to meet meet the person at the level of their needs. You know, it's not always going to church. It's trying to meet those needs, and particularly dealing with people, homeless people and things like that, and having things at our church, you know, resources that they can come to. But yes, like I said, absolutely, I believe that, you know, there's more that can be done, and better it is that we can do it collectively. I just read something in the Equal Justice Initiative that was talking about segregation in America, and this was from a senator. He says that if we can organize the southern states for massive resistance to this order, he says, I think that in time the rest of the country will realize that racial integration is not going to be accepted in the South. And I put emphasis on that massive resistance. The one thing that we have not done is, not whether it is church or secular, is there has not been massive resistance. So if we can organize, and I think someone said it, those proponents for equal justice and the eradication of police brutality and murders, for massive resistance, this country and the white supremacy will realize that Black lives matter and we're not going anywhere. And I think as Allison said, that we're gonna, you know, then that way we can take our knee and put it on their neck until white supremacy and racism die.
Wow.
You know, but it has to be massive resistance. You know, as we have to cross barriers, and we have to not to be afraid to reach out to people that are, you know, not like us.
Right. So one of the things I think, Pastor Rusty, is that pastors need training.
Absolutely.
Need training, because they don't have a clue. Many of them, all they do is preach the King James Version of the Bible. Barely know what that is. They don't even know the history behind that, and expect everybody on the pew just to do what they say. So they need to know that their job as a Black church is not to just sit there and spew out rhetoric without change, that they have to take risk. because technically all those people in the Bible that you hear about took risk for their change.
Absolutely.
So churches and pastors, they have to get off that high horse and understand that they need some development themselves. And then they take that development and take those people off the pew and put them in the street and put them to work, put their tithes and offerings to work for social justice. Okay, let me not get in trouble. Allison? The next question, Elena?
Okay.
Rachel?
Lisa Carone asked the question, why are our children's future determined by their zip codes? Can we stop the government from redlining our children and remove school zoning? Black and brown families are frequently locked out of quality education because their families cannot afford to reside in a more affluent neighborhood.
Allison?
So what I think is important is that regardless of a child's zip code, if there's a quality leader and a quality teacher, you don't need to go no place, right? So I think that that argument a lot of times, and please don't misconstrue what I'm saying, a lot of times that argument is made in order to say we need to desegregate schools. But understand this, when slavery first happened, or when slavery first ended, and the Freedmen's Bureau was established and the free Black schools were established, we were the master educators.
Yeah.
We are the originators of differentiated instruction. When you have people who are 5 years old sitting in a classroom with somebody who is 70 years old, learning from somebody that is 22 who just learned how to read themselves, we are the masters of differentiated instruction.
Mm.
We know exactly what it is we need to do in order to educate our communities. So it doesn't make a difference where your child goes to school. It depends on the leadership and the quality of teacher in that school. I have nothing, my children were educated with, I've never in my life until I got to college had a Black teacher. I'll be honest with you, never. I'm a kid raised in the projects in the middle of Bensonhurst. We were zoned, we were tracked. When those principals looked at our addresses and said, this kid comes from Marlboro High School, Marlboro Projects, we were placed in particular classes. And I said, it does not make a difference, I'm still gonna excel. So red zoning or zoning in and of itself, we shouldn't focus on that. We gotta focus on the quality of leader and the quality of the teacher that is there. We have to focus on school culture and making sure that it embraces our children versus punishing our kids. For instance, right? People thought I was completely, absolutely out of my mind that I had this school of young Black kids whom the majority of are 18 years or older, and I allowed them to wear do-rags. People thought that I was outside of my natural mind. And I said, what does a do-rag have to do with the boy's ability to learn?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting in the hallway and I had a meeting with one of my superintendents at the time. And he said, Allison, you allow these boys to wear do-rags in your school? And I said, absolutely. Because how many Black boys were suspended because they didn't want to take the do-rag off?
Mm-hmm.
When a do-rag for a boy is an earring for a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I purposefully did was I knew that there was an advanced placement class that those boys were going into. When it was time for the superintendent to walk and do an observation with me, I took him into that classroom to watch those Black boys do advanced placement work with a do-rag on.
Wow.
So we can be educated with us and by us.
Yes.
Provided the leadership and the teacher education is profound.
Well, child, I need to take an offer for you. Where to play? So listen, for those of you who are not from New York, who are hearing this, Allison's students come from all 5 boroughs. So that's the Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Manhattan, all 5 boroughs. They find her in the hood, because this is still in the heart of Bed-Stuy. They tried to call it Stuyvesant Heights, but it's still Bed-Stuy. And her kids are from all over the city. So she is absolutely right. And that means that we as parents and as a community, as Pastor Rusty said, put our knees on the necks of these people who we send our children to every day and marginalize them, don't teach them. And Allison said they put her in a special class. And I guess that means you were in the class with the less than, Allison?
I was in the, my mama fought for me. My mama made sure that I was in the honors class.
Okay.
Yeah, they tried to put us in the class with the least educated, with the least qualified teacher, and made sure that all the black children were there.
Wow.
And my mama said, no, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
No, ma'am, not my baby.
And as you guys can see, Farrington is not that old.
Yeah.
In addition, that black don't crack.
And
Farrington, she's not that old. But however, as you can see, this kind of systemic racism, we call it, is still going on. But we have the power. I had another friend who told me that he went to Brooklyn Tech. That's one of the specialized high schools when black children weren't getting in there. And his mother went there and fought for him to get in because he had the score. He had the score, but he didn't have the look. So wow, this is like really, really amazing. We got to get ready to go. But Elena, anything else?
Yes, there's one last thing. I know that it's been emphasized that we're not in the policy phase, but I've seen this question come across and stated was, our greatest resource as people of color are our children. We must invest in our children, and the way we do that is to invest in the place that students spend most of their time, schools. Mm-hmm. How can we convince the community to invest their time and money in the schools? How can we impact policy in the school systems?
So one of the things that I was thinking about when I read that question in the chat is that students do spend most of their active time in schools, right? The systematic oppression and racism that impacts them in terms of housing, the medical profession, jobs, the criminal injustice system, all of those issues are manifested at schools through student behavior. And schools are held accountable. Society isn't. Mm-hmm. Because kids spend so much active time at school, mm-hmm. everything that the system has put in place in order to destroy them, those behaviors manifest at school. And we are responsible for educating, disciplining, loving, and doing everything that society has failed to do.
Wow.
Now, if you are a courageous leader, you have to say, I understand this, I see this, I'm aware of this, and here's my remedy for it, in addition to making sure that these kids can read, write, do math, and speak. Mm-hmm. So it's leadership development as well, right? Because a lot of times when we are trained to be leaders, no one is talking about this issue. Nobody is talking about everything else that we are accountable for. Mm-hmm. There's no training for it. There's no class for it. You just jump into it. I didn't understand what suicide ideation was, mm-hmm. and how to treat that, and then how to treat the teachers and prepare the teachers when a kid commits suicide. I had no class for that. I had no preparation for that. But this is all it is that we have to do. We are responsible for dealing with all of the social ills that society has created for our young people inside of the school building, especially when it comes to educating Black and brown children.
Wow. Pastor Harris has another call he has to get on. Would you like to add to that? Because one of the things I really want, Pastor Harris, is that the church has to be involved in the schools as well. Wherever our children are, there should be some representation of the church, of the Black church. And what that looks like, I guess you would have to tell us, or there would have to be meetings of the minds with the leaders. What say you as it relates to that?
I don't think that there's one look. I know if you know Pastor Gordon has always been involved with his young people to the extent of not only just going to the families, but also going to the schools on their behalf. If there is one common denominator, I believe, is that we probably need to do more teaching behind the pulpit, you know, about the importance of parental involvement in the children's education. You know, and for me, when my kids were in elementary school and getting into, you know, the math and everything, and it was beyond me, I went back to school. Went back to college for my kids' sake, you know, so I could be able to help them in their education. I think the church probably needs to teach more the importance of that education. You know, we need to teach and preach it, you know, more of that, and probably not so much so of the fire and brimstone type of thing. And then also, which would probably be a good effective way, is to develop a department within the church that has, you know, that maybe you have educators, you know, that's part of the church, you know, that can focus on that. That can be that bridge between whatever school it is and that student. You know, someone that understands the education process and all the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs, you know, will probably be a best, but, you know, just like we probably need somebody that's in the mental health, you know, arena to help us as a community dealing with our mental health. Somebody that knows finances, you know, so on and et cetera. So perhaps, you know, and if we don't know educators, get involved. What we do at Full Joy is we have adopted a school, and we help, you know, we reach out to a teacher to find out what they need at the school, and we have you know, assisted in supplying those needs for them. You know, and we want to hopefully, prayerfully in the future, talk to other churches and have them to adopt a school in their area, you know, and then so they can do the same thing. So now we have a foot in the door, and we can get to know some of the students, and we get to know the teachers and some of the issues that they're dealing with, you know. But, you know, we can't be people's person standing on the outside looking in. Dr. Moses, thank you so very much for having me be a part of this. I do apologize to everyone that I have to go. I do have another conference call that I have to go to, but I'm enjoying this dialogue. I thank you so very much.
Thank you, Pastor Harris.
God bless you.
Yes, we're just about finished. Okay, thank you. So this is so true, and I believe, again, that the Black church is still one of our greatest institutions, because this is where we go. This is where the people bring their families. This is where we tend to listen, and the politicians know to go to the Black church. If they want votes, they find a prominent Black church, and that's where they go. So it's still a place where we can be heard. I do think that we have to hit the streets more, as Pastor Harris saying, adopting schools and finding out what some of the needs are. Sometimes just walking the hallways, and just being a presence for the students, I think makes a big difference. So we got our work cut out for us, and I think that churches need to put that in their bylaws or their policies and get stuff going, so that, Allison, I heard you clear, that you guys had to take on so much more than you would want to, because your job is to educate. It would be wonderful if you could just get them there, sit them down, and just start teaching. But you got to play mommy for the absentee mommy. You got to play daddy for the absentee daddy. You got to play the psychologist. and the psychiatrist, right? And the social worker. So you have all of these hats to fill, not only you, but even your teachers. And this is overwhelming for some of the teachers because some of them just really want to teach. They have their own problems and mental health issues that they probably need to deal with themselves. And then on top of that, having to deal with it for children, I think it's a bit much to require all of that. And unless they are, you know, multi-talented like you are, Allison Farrington, I just don't know if they'll be able to do it all. So we do see that too, because when I talk to teachers, they talk about parents. When I talk to parents, they talk about teachers, right? But the truth, you know, lies somewhere in the middle. You are amazing. Pastor Rusty is amazing. You all have been awesome tonight. I gained so much wealth and knowledge, and my phone has not stopped zinging, dinging. Where are you? We're on. We can't find you. But we're going to post this tomorrow and make sure that everybody gets this knowledge and this information. Elena, is that it?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, I was supposed to announce that there is a march tomorrow. For those of you that are in New York, the Brooklyn United Clergy, they're marching over the Brooklyn Bridge. They're gathering at 2:15, 2:30 at Cabinet Plaza, and they step off at 3 o'clock. And they're going to have a charter revision, the police reform, resourcing, community input and funding. They have all these different agencies that are out there, and they're going to be doing this peaceful demonstration in March, and they want as many of us that can will to join them at Cameron Plaza. They step off at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much for being a part. We really appreciate you, love you all. Those of you that will be airing and viewing this on Facebook, please inbox me with your questions. And I'm going to invite all of you to visit High School of Research and Service when it comes back on. You got to see it. She takes her kids out the country. She finds a way to do it. They go beyond this northern hemisphere. She takes them to Africa. She takes them to Japan, Asia. She finds a way of getting it done. So I just want you to know you got to see it to believe it. And these are kids that everybody counted out. These children were counted out. But when they got to Allison, they were counted in and they graduated. And she's doing amazing work. And tomorrow, she's going to each one of her students' homes throughout all of the 5 boroughs, and they're going to do personal graduations for all of their students. Don't ask me how she's going to do it, but she can make ways out of no way. Trust me, if she says she's going to do it, it's going to be done. So you will see her. If you need me, my information is up there. Do not hesitate to call. So God bless each of you. Thank you for coming out. Have a great night. God bless. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.